Hello, everyone. This is Rebecca Greene for the Whinypaluza podcast, and I am very excited to bring you the fabulous Teodora Pavkovic. She is going to help us with an awesome topic that's going to help all of us. Let me tell you about this wonderful lady. She is the director of Wellbeing and Parent Advocacy at Qustodio, a global leader in digital safety and family well-being tools. With a background in psychology, child development, and parent advocacy, Teodora helps families better understand how technology, social media, gaming, and now artificial intelligence are shaping children's emotional health, relationships, and development. She is passionate about helping parents raise digitally healthy kids while protecting the family's connections that matter most. Teodora, thank you so much for being here with me and tackling this awesome topic.
Oh, absolutely, Rebecca. Thank you so much for this invitation to speak to you and to your audience. This is a crazy emerging topic that we are just constantly trying to learn more and more about every single day. So I learned so much from having these conversations with really curious people. So I love it.
Well, a little something about me. I have three teenagers, so this selfishly is the perfect topic for this mom over here. So I'm going to start with, there's so many things I could ask you, but there's maybe I'm wrong even saying healthy screen use. There's healthy screen use. There's too much screen use. Can we talk with about some sort of how do we know it's healthy?
Yeah, that's been, I think, a cornerstone question when it comes to digital parenting in the age of technology. I think for certainly for at least the sort of the decade that I've been in this space, and I remember early on before we even kind of had the notion of what online safety is or digital well-being is or responsible technology use or ethical technology building or any of those things. Parents would often kind of ask that question. I would launch into the neuroscience and the psychology of it and interpersonal relationships and online safety, privacy settings. And then after, I don't know, 20 minutes, the parent would say, yeah, but how many hours every day, can I allow my kid to actually engage with this kind of technology? And so, of course, then we had the American Pediatric Association that did come out with some sort of general guidelines, I guess, for how much time we actually want to allow our small children, medium kids, and then high schoolers as well, to interact with this technology. More recently, they have revised their guidelines as well, which I think was a really significant moment because I think it kind of signaled just how complex this has all become, and that it never really was sufficient to just talk about screen time, but I think it really isn't right now. I don't think of it as irrelevant. I think of it as being as important as the actual experience in that virtual space, the actual content that a child is either creating or consuming, the conversations that they're having, who are they coming into contact with. It's still really, really important, but it's only one part of the conversation. So we have to talk about so much more than just that. We have to think about how old is this child? What is their personality like? What's their maturity level? Are they neurodiverse, neuroatypical? Are there other kids in the home? What is the family setup? What are their daily interactions? Do they have any kind of learning differences? Where are they when it comes to their ability to self-regulate? I mean, there's so many questions, right, that we need to ask and that we need to think about. And even after all of that, we may not be able to come up with a clear cut, well, 20 minutes a day, because what is that 20 minutes going to entail? So are they going to be playing a game? Are they going to be watching a cartoon? Are they going to be FaceTiming with friends or family members? Are they just going to be texting with you about after school pickup or, whatever it's going to be? And I know that doesn't necessarily make it easier for parents because, of course, as a parent, you want kind of the simplest, the easiest, quickest solution possible. But unfortunately, this landscape has gotten so kind of complicated and complex, that it's not as simple as just giving it a kind of a time limit. We have to ask some of those sort of deeper questions and get a more holistic sense of the whole child. I think that's what the American Pediatric Association, with their revised guidelines, is really also getting at. We need a more holistic sense of that child, socially, in terms of their personality, even economically, in some instances, geographically. I mean, there's so many questions to ask. And then we can ask really more of a question of, what does healthy technology use look like for this child, not just what does sort of the daily schedule potentially look like.
I mean, I think that's such a brilliant answer because basically what you're saying is every child is so different and we have to look at each child differently. So I didn't think about it that way, and I appreciate that answer. I
Yeah.
think that we should back up and I should ask, how do we know that technology is affecting our child's emotional well-being? How do we know that there's something wrong?
Yeah. Yeah. I think there's a whole kind of spectrum of impact that makes it a little bit more, again, complicated, a little bit more complex than is just sort of good or bad, or it's negative or positive. And it can kind of sit anywhere on that spectrum, again, depending on how they're using it, how they're interacting with it, what types of technologies, platforms, apps are they interacting with? What's the purpose? Even what time of day are they interacting with them? So, for example, one of the things that often surprises parents that they're not aware of is how much kind of late night usage their kids engage with, especially when they're kind of middle school, high school age. The parents think that, well, it's nighttime and it's almost bedtime, and I told them to turn the device off, or I told them to leave it outside of the bedroom, or whatever kind of rule you have in your home. So surely they're not on whatever it happens to be: FaceTime, Discord, TikTok, Gmail. It can be anything. So we need to look at some of those patterns. We need to look at some of those habits, and then really figure out, again, is this technology use really helping my child? Is it helping them improve whatever it is, academically, socially, in any other way, or is it having maybe a detrimental effect? And that can kind of take the form of, I think, what we're already used to looking out for as parents. So behavioral changes or mood changes, or you might see that they're kind of excessively attached all of a sudden to their device, or kind of obsessively checking a particular
Yeah.
platform or app. Maybe there's a bullying incident that's going on, and they're worried, or they're curious about what someone said next, or was there an additional DM there, or was there another share or a comment, whatever it is. So you might see that kind of obsessive behavior, but you might see, again, it's a spectrum all the way the other extreme, where they suddenly just are not even touching their device. They're not opening it up. They're not logging into any of their social media platforms. They're not texting with their friends anymore. And you might find that unusual too if you have a child who's sort of pretty active on their device. You might find that their kind of language or vocabulary has changed a little bit. You might find that they're perhaps acting a little bit more sort of aggressively, or they're maybe a little bit more agitated than they would be normally. Maybe they're kind of having, especially if they're younger, sort of tantrums or kind of emotional, breakdowns. So it can be any of those things that like I said, we're always on the lookout for those things anyway, because lots of different kind of environmental factors, I guess, can impact our kids in that way. It's their friendships, it's relationships with their coach or their teacher, or just
Oh,
a
true.
stranger on the street, or a sibling, or you as their caretaker. We're always looking out for those anyway. So you're not necessarily trying to find anything that's new or particularly sort of mysterious or unknown. You're looking for some of the same signs as you always are, but you'll then need to dig in a little bit deeper and figure out, did this happen as the result of kind of a face-to-face interaction at school, or was there a stranger that suddenly started bullying them through, Roblox, or, whatever the platform is that they're spending their time on.
Ah, bullying. So you said such a key
Yeah.
word. I've seen it. I'm trying not to get emotional, but I have seen it and it's making me choked
Yeah.
up. So as a parent,
Yeah.
can you give us some tools to step in and help with the online bullying
Yeah.
that I'm seeing?
Sure. Yeah. So we talk a lot about those kind of, again, cornerstone, those key central kind of recommendations and pieces of advice in general, whether we're talking about bullying or we're just talking about managing screen time or whatever digital footprint, whatever it is we're talking about. And one of the main things really is conversation, communication. Again, it's nothing new. Like you'll hear that from your pediatrician and you'll hear that from your teacher. You'll hear that from everybody. It is really, really important. And we do
Yeah.
find that especially as kids get into kind of that middle school age, parents start to sort of step away a little bit when it comes to kind of digital parenting. And it can be for a variety of reasons. Maybe they think my child is now old enough to manage some of this on their own, or I keep nagging them and this is really causing a kind of a deterioration in our relationship. I'm just going to kind of back off a little bit and leave them to it. Whatever the reason is, I always say, stay involved. Don't nag for sure. You never want to do that, but you want to stay involved because most of the time when these types of negative online experiences happen, parents are in the dark and kids often don't tell their trusted adult that they have been bullied because they're afraid that they'll basically be on the receiving end of one of a couple of different kind of interventions or options that the parent will provide. One will be, I'm going to take away your device immediately, so you're cut off, or I'm going to switch off the internet, or it will be, well, why don't you just get off that platform then, or why don't you just block that person? Why don't you just remove yourself from that setting? And that's a kind of knee jerk reaction that doesn't not make sense. But that social fabric that kids are a part of online is far too, again, complex for that simple of a sort of an intervention. So that's one thing I would say first. For parents is it is important to continue to have those conversations. Just check in with your child every once in a while, see what's going on online, if they had any negative experiences. And then if you hear that they have, try to resist those knee-jerk reactions. So come from a very kind of open, curious place. What happened? Why don't you tell me a little bit more about that? Why do you think that happened? And then ask, I think, one of the key questions, which is, what to you would be the ideal resolution of this situation? And it could be that they'll say, I just want to kind of get out of it. I don't want to block this person. I want to remove them. I want to remove myself. It could be, I don't want to go to school for a few days. It could be a lot of different things, but get them to think about some solutions too before you kind of jump in with that fix it kind of attitude, and ask them also, how can I help you? What do you want me to do? Should we talk to the teacher? Should we talk to that child? Should we role play a little bit so that you can go and have some of these conversations? Do you want to report them on that platform? Has it kind of gotten that far? Is it that bad? In what way do you want me to be involved in this? How can I actually help you do this? And I think to prep a little bit for that, what I also always recommend is that parents understand some of the basics around reporting on all the different platforms their kids might use. So it's really good for you to understand how to do that. It's important that you also understand some fundamentals, things like if any nude images were involved in the bullying, you really don't want to be screenshotting them. And I always recommend everyone check what your local laws are when it comes to that, because it can be considered a sort of a criminal act, even if it is your own child. So there's some basics there that you kind of want to cover. But I think the important thing is, unless your child is very, very young, to really make it a collaborative effort, to really ask them some of those questions, to come from an open, curious, calm place as much as you can, and then really ask them, how can I help you? How can we make this better? What is, again, your ideal kind of exit strategy? How do we make this stop? And how can I help you get there?
I mean, those questions are perfect because when we do talk to our children, they often do know how they want to handle it and are just kind of venting it
Exactly.
out to us. So, we think we have to jump in with a solution, and that's really not
Yeah.
our job. So, I
Not
appreciate,
always.
yeah,
Not always.
yeah, not always.
Yeah.
Sometimes they don't know what to do, but a lot of times they have an idea of what they want
True.
to do. So we see that
True,
there's an,
true. And I have, sorry to interrupt you.
no, go ahead.
I was just gonna add one more thing there.
Yes.
I've had conversations with teenagers where as part of some of the work that I do, where I've asked them questions around, what to you is an ideal way for a parent to be involved? What are the types of scenarios in which you would want a parent to be involved in? What are some of the ways in which you like and dislike the way your parent gets involved? And there have been kids who have said, I had a very serious case of bullying, and my parents really stepped in a very proactive kind of way,
Mhm.
and blocked that kid from my whatever it may have been, Instagram or whatever it is. And I'm really thankful that they did that, that they really stepped in and helped me, because I didn't really know what to do. And it was a case of bullying where it kind of meandered through the internet and went from one platform to the other, to the other, to the other. It became really a kind of taunting sort of bullying.
Ugh.
It wasn't just a one-off thing. So, like you said, there are cases like that where absolutely your parental instinct to really go kind of lioness or lion in that situation is absolutely warranted, because you can see that your child is just kind of drowning in that scenario, and they don't
Yes.
maybe know how to deal with it. And those are absolutely the moments where you should be jumping in, because that's your job. But you want to be able to go through that kind of discovery period, if you will, first, and figure out, is it one of those scenarios, or is this really something that I can use as a learning opportunity for my child, that I can use as an opportunity to build their digital resilience as well, so that they do experience some of that social friction that increasingly younger generations are starting to experience online, more so than offline. But is this an opportunity where I can just kind of, we talk about scaffolding a lot, right? But like, can I take that role, be there, and let them know that I'm there, but not get overly involved, so that they can still use their own thinking and in trying to figure out this scenario, and kind of figure out really what would be the best way to navigate this situation.
Well, and I love your terms. I'm going to take this with me, not to have the knee jerk reaction. Because in parenting in general,
Yeah.
that is the best advice.
Yes.
Because when I
Yeah,
pause, I'm so much happier with what I say than when I like jump,
absolutely.
right? So
Absolutely.
we see that there's an issue. We want to set some boundaries. Any advice on how we can do that without the constant fighting with our kids?
Yeah. Setting boundaries as early as you can. Not all parents start these conversations super early. We would love it if, I don't know, from the age of 2 or 3, when a child first starts interacting with a tablet, which is typically the way their journey begins, it'd be
Yep.
wonderful if parents started in a very simple, kind of age appropriate way to start discussing that. We have 5 minutes, and using a clock, using a timer, using an alarm, using something to get the child used to that kind of cadence and the sense of the passage of time, which they're not yet aware of, right? When they're that little. So those are some like really simple ways that you can start very early on. And not all parents do, obviously. And sometimes you have a kid in middle school and you've never really talked about these things, and now they're begging for a phone, and all the kids are using them, and you find out that even though they don't have a phone, they already know how TikTok works, because one of their friends has it and they've been using it.
Yeah.
All these things happen. It gets very messy and kind of overwhelming. And then you feel like, well, have I just kind of gotten to this too late? Have I missed the boat on this? The answer is no, you never have. Regardless of how old your child is, whenever you discover that this is a challenge, is the moment from which kind of the clock starts, and this is where you can really actively do something about this. Again, it goes back to kind of starting with that conversation. Again, trying to come from a as open and curious and kind of non-judgmental a place as you possibly can. Ask some questions around your child's tech use, what they like about it, what they don't. Ask them, do they notice that there are any problems or sort of difficulties
I
that they
love
maybe
that.
have with with their tech use, because a lot of the times when we ask them this, and if you've been following like the Pew Research Center's polls or Gallup or Common Sense Media, all of those key organizations that put out a lot of research around this, they'll often ask kids, have you ever tried anything to kind of curb your time online or to try and make your experiences healthier and stuff? And a majority of kids typically say yes, which I think is a great thing, because it tells us that they know that it's difficult. They know that it's a problem. They know that it can be really, really challenging to manage our time online. They already know this. One of the reasons they know it is because they watch you experiencing the challenge of managing your own screen time as well. And typically, I found that for every parent who complains about their child's screen time, you have a child who complains about the parent's screen time, right? So that's always the case. We're in this together, and I think we can use that as a kind of bonding moment to talk about how do we create those boundaries? How do we make it easier to spend the kind of time that we want online? And recently, I think a couple of months ago, Pew came out with another poll where they asked teens for more kind of specific details around a few social media platforms in particular. And they asked them questions around, like, do you think you spend too much time there or not? Have you, again, tried to curb your screen time? And, not surprisingly, TikTok emerged as the most problematic platform for them. And most
Mm.
commonly, kids have said that that's where they feel like they spend too much of their time. This is not by accident. This is because we know that the TikTok platform and algorithm is particularly well designed for that, for capturing our attention and really keeping it there for a very long time. And we all experience this struggle. So these are some of the kind of commonalities that I think we can really bond over with our kids, so that it's not a battle, so that we're not fighting and arguing. We do need to try and stay really firm once we've decided on we call this a tech agreement or a digital agreement, whatever you want to call it in your family. And it doesn't have to be a kind of a formal thing you do, but really coming together, agreeing on some of these rules, and then saying, okay, let's test these ones out for, say, 3 months or 6 months, and then we'll come back together, and then we'll talk about them. And maybe you would have outgrown them at that point, or maybe you'll be ready to try out an additional social media platform, whereas for now we're just sticking to this one. Or you can have a little bit of extra gaming time or something like that. So you don't want to stay rigid. You do want to stay consistent and make sure that once you've also agreed on the consequences, you really stick to them. Because everybody knows once they sense that weakness in you, and they know they can kind of distract you, they can work around your kind of your schedule or the consequences that you set up, then they'll try and poke a little bit more and try and get you to to fail at what you're trying to do with keeping
Yeah.
that structure in place, right? They'll find the weak spot, and they'll keep going and going and going. So it's really important that you agree on those boundaries, the consequences to if those rules and boundaries are broken. You maintain those, and then when the time comes, you revisit everything, and you go, right, now you're a little bit older, you're maybe more mature, you're prepared to be a little bit more independent and responsible. Let's revisit this. And we do that with so many things, right? We do that when we think about, can they cross the street by themselves? Can they pack their own lunch? Can they put on their own clothes? We do it with so many other things in the offline world. Again, this is the same principle. We're just now applying it to their online activity and asking questions around how prepared are they to ultimately manage it on their own, right? I feel like that's kind of the key goal for any parent. I'm preparing my child to be able to do all of this just without me at some
Yes.
point. So
Yes.
online safety is the same thing. We have us there to talk to them. We have parental controls if we choose to use those. We have some on-platform safety measures as well. There's all these different things that we can put into place to try and make the experience safer. But if they don't know how to do that for themselves, we're really not going to achieve our ultimate goal of their ability to take care of themselves online. So all of that is really trying to serve that goal. And as they get older, become more mature, really prove to us and themselves that they can take care of themselves online, then we want to kind of reshape those rules to make sure that they match, again, their levels of maturity, their experiences, and again, their ability to take care of themselves online.
So good. It's all, you have my wheels spinning. I'm going to throw myself under the bus because, um, my children are really good. We value sleep in this house. And and I
Yeah,
love the parents who take the phones away at a certain time at night. I commend all
yeah,
of you who are doing that. I have not
yeah,
done that because I have seen responsible children going to sleep. I see their phones far from their
right.
bed. I see them going to sleep. Now, last night at 11
Mhm.
o'clock, I hear my daughter on the phone
Uh-huh.
and I'm like, go to bed. That never happens. So this morning, she's complaining that she's tired. So I
Mhm.
started asking her questions. So the knee jerk reaction would have been to, get pissed, set some
Yeah,
rules. You know, I started
yes.
asking her some questions and
Mhm.
I said, going to bed at 10, like you always do, you see how much better you feel. So I'm trying to get
Mhm.
her thinking before I go to the next step. And the next step will be I
Yes.
take the phone out of the room, but I'm going to see if she can do it herself because that hasn't happened before.
Yes.
But we don't want them on the phone at 11
Yeah.
o'clock at night.
No, absolutely not. It's that expression, and the time varies, but nothing good happens after midnight. It applies offline, it applies online too.
Yes.
And again, that's
Yes.
where we see a lot of risky activity tends to happen at that time for a
Uh,
few different reasons. One of them is our ability to make good decisions kind of deteriorates, right? The later on in the
that
day
is
that it is.
true.
That's just kind of it's just a fact of our physiology and neuroscience, and you just get tired physically, mentally, in all the different ways. So that's one thing. The other thing is that unfortunately there are a lot of bad actors in the online world. There just are. And the ones who are seeking out children will seek out the times when they think they're not being supervised. And so if a
Mm,
child is awake and online and chatting or playing a game or whatever they're doing at 11, 12, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in the morning, it's a pretty safe bet that there is no parental supervision in that moment, at least, or there's no
so smart.
awareness, right? The parent just
Ugh,
doesn't know that that's
yeah.
what's happening, and I'm sure you may have seen the show Adolescence on Netflix. I think a lot of people watching may have done too.
I have
It was
not,
a
but I
very
will.
okay. Yes, yes. I would recommend you do, keeping in mind that it is it's a TV series. It comes across as very dramatic in certain moments, which it's trying to do, right? Because it is a piece of sort of dramatic art, if you will. So it's not always necessarily a reflection of reality. But one of the things I did appreciate about it is that they do kind of look at that particular. They look at a few different topics around online safety, but that's one of them. That late night use of the device, whatever it is that's going on inside that device, behind that screen, and how problematic it can be. Because again, oftentimes the parent's assumption is they're in the safety of my home, or they're in the safety of their own bedroom. What could possibly go wrong? And unfortunately, a lot of things can go wrong, because if they are on that device, then really the whole virtual world is accessible to them, and they're accessible to it as well. But what you pointed out, I think, is really important in the conversations that you were asking her, as opposed to just jumping in and kind of giving her the answer, if you will. Because I find it interesting that she didn't seem to connect the dots between that late
Oh,
night usage and then in the morning going, oh, I'm so tired. She didn't connect those dots. To us, it seems perfectly obvious, right? It's a
yes,
no-brainer, but for her, it
yes.
isn't. So if you
No.
were to jump into the kind of conclusion and say, right, this is what you did, this is wrong, I don't like it, whatever it is, I'm taking away your phone, or whatever's going on, she wouldn't have gone through the process of actually learning it and figuring it out for herself. And I think that's one of the other issues we run into with kind of this attachment that we have to our devices, is we're not as in tune with our own physiology, with our own bodies, with our minds, with our emotions. We've become really kind of disconnected because we're so connected to the device. And I've found that often, especially with people who use a lot of wearables. If you try and ask So I would recommend everyone do this just for fun. Someone who wears something like an Oura Ring or, Fitbit type thing or whatever kind of device. Ask them how they slept the night before. And I guarantee you they will not be able to answer that question without checking the wearable or checking the phone to see
Oh
what the
my
app says.
gosh, that's so funny.
You know, and
So
it's
true.
just it's incredible, but that's something that I discovered years back when I was still doing coaching with people, with young adults. I would ask some of my clients, how did you sleep the night before? And they wouldn't be able to answer me. They wouldn't be able to tell me because they had no felt sense of
Oh,
what that sleep felt like or did for them, or what was the quality of that sleep. They would have to check the metrics first. And so
mm,
that's something else to keep in mind, I think, for us as adults, but in terms of our kids, and one of the potential kind of impacts of their tech use is that there is that disconnect between kind of how I feel in my body and just kind of what's rushing through my head as I'm watching TikTok, or I'm typing out a text, or I'm sending out an email, or I'm writing out a college essay on Google Docs, whatever it is. We're so kind of in here all the time and connected to all this information that we're kind of head down, as a lot of people in this space have said. We're just kind of numb. We don't have that felt sense of our bodies. So a great way to get our kids attuned to that is to do exactly what you did, which is to ask a few questions to get them to connect those dots, because that she was completely unaware of the impact that late night tech use had on her.
my gosh. When does she ever go to bed at 11 o'clock? Okay, well, that's not happening tonight, everybody. So, so artificial intelligence. Okay. I didn't even think about this until I did some research to talk to you.
Yeah.
I can't, I'm so ashamed of how clueless I am. Okay. So it's changing the way that we need to think about so many things. And I didn't know this. We have to think about digital safety with artificial intelligence. We have to think about them forming relationships with artificial intelligence. Okay, you need to help us with this because I'm so sorry. I'm totally ignorant on this.
That's totally fine. I had a conversation, I think it's about a year ago now, and Chat GPT, which is kind of right, the main, the sort of the fundamental piece of AI tech that we think about when we talk about AI. It's been around for about 3 years now, but about a year ago, I was having a conversation with a mom whose youngest child, I think, was a middle schooler. She had a middle schooler, a high schooler, and a college student. And so I figured she must know what AI is. She knows what Gemini is. She knows what ChatGPT is. So I just launched into this conversation with her, assuming she knew all of these things. And then she said, it's good we're talking about this today and not yesterday, because I just discovered Gemini yesterday. I just figured out what it is and what it does. And Gemini is the Google version of ChatGPT. So there are a lot of parents who just don't know. They're not using the technology themselves. They're not particularly interested in it. And also, if you're on social media, depending on the kind of content you engage with, the recommendation algorithm may not be showing you a whole lot of AI content because it figures you're not interested in it. So that's why you don't know. I would say it's really important for everyone to do what you did and to do a little bit of research to get a kind of a basic understanding of what's out there. What are some of these general purpose bots, like a Chat GPT, like a Gemini, like a Copilot, some of the other ones? What are some of the more kind of character bots or companion based bots that people may have heard about as well? So this is platforms like
I didn't know any of
character.ai.
and if you
Yep,
are like me and they might not even know what chat is, so we might need you to tell them. Um,
sure,
I didn't know that it goes more than
sure.
that. That's all I knew is what that
Yeah,
was. But people might not know what that
yeah,
is if you can tell them.
sure. No, absolutely. So at a kind of, well, I was going to say at a basic level, none of this is basic. It's all incredibly complex, and I'm certainly not a data scientist, so I'm not going to go into those depths. But we have generative AI, and we have these generative AI platforms that are built upon what are known as large language models. So what this basically means is that these tech companies have basically vacuumed up, if you will, sucked in, all of the information that's available out there on the internet, whether it's in audio form, a written form, a video form, whatever kind of shape and size it's come in. They've absorbed all of it and they've kind of taught it to this AI bot. They've pumped in all of that information and said, okay, use this existing information to help generate slightly new or novel or different information when you get a prompt. So when I do educational webinars with parents, I like to share with them a very basic prompt that I've used with I think it was ChatGPT to just generate an image. So the prompt that I would put in, and a prompt is kind of what we used to do or still do with Google, right? Where you put in a question and you go, what's the best cake shop in my town, right? So it's kind of the equivalent of that. We just do that with these generative AI platforms now. So you can put in a prompt saying something like, create a picture for me that shows a pink parrot flying through the night sky with bubbles all around. Now, that doesn't exist in the real world. I don't think so. Anyway, let me know if it does somewhere because I'd love to see it, but that doesn't actually exist. That's not real. But that bot will use all of the information that's been fed to it that tells it what a bird looks like and what the color green looks like and what bubbles look like and what is the night sky. And it will pull from all of those sources of information and create this picture for you. And what's really cool about these platforms as well is that then if I don't like that picture or I want it to be different, I can give it another prompt and say, can you make this bigger or smaller, add this, take this away, and so on. And this can go on and on and on and on. So that's why it's called generative. It's creating essentially new or novel information, but it's basing it on everything that it's been taught, and it's been taught a lot. And so we have these they're referred to as these general purpose bots. So these are created by some of these really, really huge tech companies that I think most parents are aware of at this point. So you've got Microsoft and you've got Google, you have OpenAI that's kind of a little bit new to the scene that's created ChatGPT. And these are platforms that sort of in the way that YouTube replaced your kind of generic sort of text-based search, right? A lot of people now will just go into YouTube and type in their question. They won't go into kind of Google anymore. ChatGPT and Copilot and these types of generative AI platforms are kind of the new version of that, where a lot of people will just go straight in there and ask a question. The reason being that these technologies are made to sound like they're human. So they're not made to sound super mechanical and kind of robotic and just spit out an answer. They will say hi. They might ask how you are doing. They'll know based on your location what city you're in. So they might even try and use a greeting in your local dialect. They're supposed to be very personable and they're supposed to engage with you so that you feel good in that interaction and you build some sense of trust, right? So that you will come back to it. So these are kind of these general purpose bots that already feel quite human and they feel, again, quite sort of personable. We then have this different related but slightly different category of these more companion-based or character-based bots. One of the first ones ever was Replica. So I'd encourage everyone to just go and check it out online and kind of see what it's about. But it's essentially this type of technology essentially provides you with the opportunity to create a character of your liking. And you can create, a character that you know and love, like Superman, and say, I want to chat with Superman and I want it to feel and sound like I'm actually speaking to Superman. Or on some of these platforms like character.ai, you'll have, I don't know, hundreds or thousands of existing characters already that you can then kind of pick and choose and you can interact with them. And you can have all kinds of conversations with them. You can use voice. In some cases, you can use video. You can speak to them in different languages, right? So they're advancing in all kinds of ways.
Yeah.
So it's pretty crazy and it's pretty incredible and it's wonderful and amazing. And it's also absolutely terrifying because it hasn't been around. Yeah, it hasn't been around for a very long time, but it can do some pretty incredible things. And I think one of the most incredible things probably is the fact that it sounds and kind of feels very, very human. And I think that's where then some of these issues emerge, like becoming connected to it, attached to it, having a hard time kind of being pulled away from it. These kind of the same way that our operational systems in our laptops are updated, right? Every so often, the version of your operating system inside your phone gets updated. The same is true of these AI bots. And they will feel and sound a little bit different with each one of these kind of updates. And so with ChatGPT, there was one particular update that kind of changed it quite a lot. It just changed kind of the way it sounded, the type of vocabulary it used. And the people who had been using it really frequently reported that they really had issues having to use this new version because it felt like they weren't talking to the same person anymore. And some of them had serious issues with kind of separation and even grieving the loss of that relationship. And it was a whole thing. And so for me, that's probably the most interesting aspect of all of this is that sense that you're speaking to a human and you're connecting to a human. You're not. And that's I think one of the most interesting things. That you're not. It's very clear that you're not, but it feels as though it is. And I think for the human brain, the human mind, human emotions, that's really all it takes. Because we're very good at looking at inanimate objects and kind of infusing them with thought and feeling and personality. That's what little kids do with a toy, right? When you're really little. That's what you do. And there's a whole area in psychology, that has looked at that and explored it and researched it. So now we have these AI technologies that are emerging that I think are starting to kind of emulate or replicate that same kind of a relationship. And it's still so early in that kind of relationship that we don't fully yet even understand it, but it's not waiting around for anyone. So this is happening kind of in a way. The horse has bolted in the sense that that technology is now out there. It's in the world. We have to now figure out what we're going to do with it.
Uh, I was just thinking my first introduction to this was a book that was talking about a woman using it as a grief bot. She had lost her husband. Okay. So I
And
had,
that's Replica.
okay.
I
So
think that's the Replica story. Yeah.
I had no idea. And
Mhm.
then, so that was a while ago. Then I'm
Yeah.
meeting with you and I'm looking up
Yeah.
children forming relationships. And I was never put the two and two
Yeah.
together that people like
Yeah.
our children are doing this. So
Yeah. Yeah.
any guidance for us? Because I am sure I'm not alone in that I had no idea that this was happening.
Yeah. That's a really important thing to, I think, just kind of pause for a moment and just kind of bring into awareness the fact that just because as parents we may not be aware of these, it of course doesn't mean that our children are not aware of them. So they are learning about these technologies pretty early. And not just that, but they're starting to use them. They're starting to interact with them. And that's one of the findings that I probably find the most sort of alarming in kind of poll after poll, survey after surveys, that there's a pretty big sort of discrepancy in terms of the perception that parents have, not even parental awareness of what this technology is, but when parents are asked, do you think your child uses this technology? An overwhelming majority of parents, in some cases, it will be something like 70%, will say, no, my child definitely doesn't use this kind of technology. And then when the kids are asked, 90% of the kids say, yeah, no, I use this almost on a
Mhm.
daily basis. So that for me is one of the most important things is for parents to learn a little bit about the technology, but then to really
Yeah.
start talking to their child about it. The chances are very high that they're already using it. There was a report, I think, early last week that just came out from the Girl Scouts of America. They did a little bit of a kind of a poll or a survey with girls and their parents, asking them about these AI bots and do they use them? How do they use them? What do they like about them? So on. And again, it was a little over, I think, 50% of the girls they spoke to said that yes, they use them on a daily basis. Many of them use them as again, companions, to get a sense of comfort, a sense of companionship. They have a pretty kind of high level of trust in this technology as well. And it was something like 65% of them see this as, or look at this technology as a friend. And the statistics are kind of starting to look very similar across the world. So in the UK, there was a study recently too. It was something like, I think around a third of the kids they spoke to. When I say kids, I do mean teenagers. The teenagers use this type of technology. The number one reason was to seek out advice. And then it was something like around 55 or 60% of them trust it either moderately or completely, which is the thing that, of course, worries me a little bit, because it's not something that can be trusted, certainly not completely, by any stretch of the imagination. Something like, I think 90% of Gen Zers feel like they wouldn't be able to live without these types of conversational AI tools. And in fact, a majority of them said that they would rather give up TikTok than these conversations with an AI bot. So I think that tells you a lot.
Oh my
TikTok
gosh.
being by far, the most popular, the most used, the most frequently open social media platform for a lot of, older Gen Alphas and certainly Gen Zers and certainly younger millennials as well. It kind of cuts across generations. So that attachment is already forming. It's already there. Kids are already reaching out for these technologies. Many of them are doing it for learning. Many of them are doing it in perfectly okay, acceptable ways, right? So again, it's that knee-jerk reaction. We don't want to, we want to give our kids the benefit of the doubt. We want to try and avoid that kind of panic reaction where we immediately launch into, have you heard of this really dangerous technology and it's, can't be trusted, and all of that. The chances are good that your child's already using it. So I think, again, trying to panic in a dark corner somewhere where no one can see or hear you, and then go and speak to your child and ask them some questions around AI. What types are you using? Do you use some for school, for learning? By the way, you're not going to get in trouble. I'm genuinely curious because I'm learning a lot about this technology. I don't know a lot about it, and I'm sure you have more experience than I do. So I want to learn, and I want to understand what are the different kinds. What are you using them for? What do you see your friends using them for? Have you ever received like a weird response from it? Has it ever made you feel weird or icky, or like it almost knows too much about you or understands you too well? Have you ever caught it making just an outright mistake, or sounding overly confident with something? Because we know it has the tendency to do that as well. So there are all these different questions that we can ask to explore this relationship that our child is probably already starting to form with that technology. It may not be a problematic relationship right now, but we need to be aware of it. Again, going back to that reason of the anthropomorphic nature of that. And what that means is that it kind of looks and sounds and feels like it's human. Again, not by accident, by design. It's made to sound that way, because the whole point is for us to form that kind of relationship with it, a close, trusting relationship. That's the whole idea. So if your child is already starting to feel that kind of familiarity, that's why, again, it's by design. But there are a lot of questions that we can ask about that relationship and the role that AI plays in their life, sort of before we get a little bit too maybe panicky or worried about, is this now moving into kind of unhealthy or risky territory?
I mean, you're full of so much good advice. Basically, don't panic. And I want to say that when we do panic, they don't want to talk to us. So we know that panicking
Exactly.
doesn't work.
Exactly. Yeah, it's a natural reaction. Like there's
Yeah.
nothing wrong with it. It's just it's a human reaction. It's that sense of overwhelm, especially when you're unfamiliar with something, and then you suddenly realize that kind of, to your kid, this is old news. Like this is, they've already become completely used to this, and it's a normal part of their everyday life. But yeah, if they sense that you are panicking about something, you are worried about something, when they sense that it's something that you don't know a lot about, which is often why we panic to begin with, it does put you in a weaker position where they won't trust you necessarily as that authority to really make decisions or to really be able to help or guide them in the best way possible. That's why I think it's always good to get yourself educated about these things, research a little bit, get an understanding for example, what the different types of bots are, what the different types of tools are, what are their different capabilities, what are the things that they can or can't do, what are some of the ethical implications in that. People talk a lot about the impact it might have on the environment, the impact it might have on intellectual property, especially when we're talking about the arts like music and painting and sculpture and film and TV shows and all of these different things. So there are a lot of ethical implications there. There are a lot of environmental implications, and then there are a lot of just kind of emotional and social implications there as well. And we want to talk about all of them, really. We all need to be aware of them, kids, adults, absolutely everybody, because it impacts everybody. We're all invested in this now. And I think there's no, there's no one kind of side that's responsible for it or that's going to fix it, whatever that might mean, or that's going to make it better. I think it has to be absolutely everybody. It has to be the parents, and it's going to be the kids, and it's going to be the schools, and it's going to be the tech companies and the governments and the experts and the advocates and absolutely everybody who's going to have to come together and hopefully try to get on the same page. And again, the same way that in that kind of microcosm, we do this with a family where we talk about, here's this family's digital agreement. What is our global digital agreement when it comes? Yeah, what do we want? What do we how do we want to think and feel about these technologies? What do we want them to look like? Recently, I don't know how many people have heard of the Webby Awards. It's a pretty prestigious award that's given to individuals, organizations, like podcast hosts, for example, who do a really great job with their marketing or the content they present or so on. It's all really based around sort of internet activity, and there are lots of different categories. And for this year, the Webby Award for the Person of the Year was given to Claude. Claude is an AI bot. One of the leading AI bots, in fact, right? Created by a company called Anthropic. So Anthropic has Claude the same way that Google has Gemini and Microsoft has Copilot. So this AI bot has been given a pretty prestigious, sort of well-known, right, award for Person of the Year. And for me, that was an interesting moment because it goes back to this idea of, what do we want from this technology? I thought we weren't okay with it sounding and feeling and looking this human. I thought that was our digital agreement on a kind of societal level. But then if someone comes out and says, oh no, you're a person and you're the best person in the world, then now suddenly we're having to revisit that again and go, okay, maybe we're okay with it being a person. Pretty sure we're not, though, because we know all the problems that can come from that. So that's what I mean. It's probably the biggest challenge we have, but we need to create that digital agreement, I think, on a much larger scale than one family or one school district or one country. It's not going to work unless we can all somehow come together and agree on some of these basic elements around what role do we want this technology to play in our lives, and therefore, how does it need to be designed in order to fulfill that role?
Oh my goodness. All the things that we don't know.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I feel bad because I know I've kept you too long, but I can't let you
That's all
go
right.
before I ask you about safety. So
Sure.
we've talked about safety. It's been interwoven in this whole conversation, but
Yeah.
how can I would love some pointers for all of us parents to just something extra to help us keep our kids safe online.
Hmm. That's the question, right? That's a really big question. No
Oh,
short
I know.
answer.
You know, I
Yeah,
know.
no,
I'm
that's
sorry.
all right. Oh no, that's totally fine. The tough questions are good. They make us think a little, like you said, a little bit extra, a little bit harder about how to at least try to approach the problem and try
Yes.
to resolve it. I think some of it is what do we mean by safe? How do we define safety? I have these conversations a lot with colleagues when we kind of geek out on these things. I think one of the fundamental things we have to do is define safety. So what does it mean for a child to be safe online? And what does that mean in the context of a 2-year-old who's maybe watching Bluey on YouTube? And what does that mean for a 9-year-old who's going to be on Roblox? And what does it mean for a 13-year-old who's going to be on TikTok? And it goes on and on and on. And some of it comes down to behavior. So our behavior, the child's behavior, the family's behavior. Again, what are some of those rules and boundaries that we come up with? And some of it is, again, the design of those platforms. What are they designed for? AI is designed to sound human and to build trust and attachment. TikTok is designed to be opened up 100 times a day and used and consumed. Gaming platforms are as well. They're not designed to be picked up by your 8-year-old for 60 seconds at a time and then forgotten for a whole week. It's engagement, it's usage, right? It's all the time. So again, some of that responsibility rests with those tech companies, and we've talked about that before. And we have a lot of parents who are also advocates, which I think is amazing, and I think that's really important. Outside of that, when we feel like there are these things that we can't control, we always want to come back to, well, what can we control? So what can I actually do in my own home, with my own family, with my own child, with everyone who comes in contact with my child as well. Going back to, again, your individual child, you know them the best. You know what they're like, you know what they like, what they dislike, you know what their habits are, you know what their needs are. And you may not consciously know it, but you probably know the ways in which tech can be really beneficial for them, and the ways in which it can actually probably just sort of diminish whether it's well-being, their ability to concentrate, their ability to be a good sibling, their ability to be a good friend, and so on. So again, looking at your child's age, their maturity level, and so on, think about healthy limits. What do the healthy limits look like? What will that look like? And again, if you have 2 kids, it might be different. If you have 3 kids, it might be different for each one of those kids. It's important for them to understand that, and this is one of the probably biggest pain points for parents, is just because one of you has to do this, it doesn't mean that all of you have to do the same. The rules are going to be a little bit different. Not everyone goes to bed at the same time. Not everyone, and all of that. So same thing again, when it comes to these devices, you might have a child who really struggles to emotionally regulate. And so one of the rules for them might be after 8 p.m., you're not able to access the internet on any of your devices. If you'd like to, you can for a little bit in a common area in the home where we're all together, but you don't get to take that device with you because you haven't learned yet how to manage your tech use, when you get tired, or when you're grumpy, or when you're hungry, whatever it is. Whereas you might also have a child who, kind of like your daughter, is fine, goes to bed at a certain time, doesn't really use the device in the bedroom, and that's okay. But really thinking about the child individually, thinking about observing how technology can have and where it can have a positive or negative impact, and then really tailoring that tech use based off of that. And you might find that in some cases that will be really restrictive, and maybe you'll decide that you don't want any technology use whatsoever, I don't know, until they're 7, and maybe you don't want them to own their own phone until they're 14 or 15, and maybe you don't want them to get on social media until they're 16, and you have the right to make all of these decisions. You have the right to make really any decision that you want. The important thing is to really do it in a thoughtful, mindful kind of way, really looking at your family, at your child, thinking about what they need. And again, staying flexible, staying agile, coming back to those rules every few months. And really, again, just talking to your child, just talk, ask them what they've seen, what they've heard, what's the dumbest thing they saw online today, what's the funniest, what's the scariest, is there a new trend that's going around, what do they think about it, what is, looks maxing, and have they come across any get ready with me videos, and what clothes are popular right now, whatever it is, what song is really, in right now. And have they seen any crazy, AI slop videos created of elephants swimming in the ocean, or any of these kind of this crazy AI content that we're seeing. Whatever it is, just keep those conversations going and share your own experiences as well. Someone really weird texted me yesterday, or someone tried to DM me the other day that seemed really bizarre, or if you came across a potential scam or something like that, share those experiences with them as well when you ended up being unsafe online, because kids probably think, oh, this is just about me. I'm the one who's always getting into trouble. As a kid, I'm the only one who's targeted. You're not. Everyone is. The elderly are targeted. Everybody, absolute women are targeted. Everybody is targeted online. Unfortunately, it's an environment that's conducive to that kind of behavior, right? You have that kind of mass mentality. It's very easy to hide. It's very easy to be anonymous, and it's very easy to just not be a particularly nice person online in certain kinds of environments. So online safety is something that we all have to be mindful of. As I mentioned earlier, it's something we can really bond with our kids over. So many parents cite that as the biggest cause of issues, arguments, rifts, just tension within the family. And so many of them say, it's technology. This is what's making my life living hell. This is what's damaging my relationship with my child. It's the exhaustion, it's the overwhelm, it's the guilt, it's all of those things that really get in the way. So I think we need to find more points of similarity, more points of kind of compassion and empathy and understanding for all of our experiences. We're all in this together. We're all equally at risk when it comes to online sort of incidents and issues and negativity. And we all stand to kind of benefit from it in similar ways as well. Some of that is out of our control, and that goes back to the design of these platforms, what kind of laws are going to be built around them, all that stuff that we can sort of impact, but not as much as, again, what happens in our own home and what happens in our own kitchen or at the dining table. What are some of those expectations that we set up and those rules? And do we have conversations with our kids, and how often? And do we make sure that we manage our own screen time as well? I think one of the kind of the best way to score points with your kid is if you say, okay, I'd like to set up some rules for you, but I'm going to let you set up some rules for me as well. So let's figure out how we can limit my screen time, and let's see how we can limit your screen time so that we minimize that technoference that can sometimes happen within our home. So try and make it a bonding experience as much as possible so that it doesn't kind of pull everyone apart.
Absolutely. I mean, you just have me thinking about bringing my phone to the dinner table. None of us should be bringing our phone to the dinner table. Like, I'm smacking my
No.
hand. I was in the middle of a conversation. Put the phone away. Show them
Yeah,
that you have limits too. And I've been yelled at for that
exactly.
by the teenagers. So no
Yeah.
phone at the dinner
I'm
table.
I'm gonna have to side with them on that one. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Listen, I make mistakes. I make mistakes with technology, and
Yeah.
we complain about our kids, but we're just as bad. So we have to model what we're looking for, right?
100%.
Yes. I mean, you have said so. I mean, I could talk to you all day. I could ask you so many more questions. You are full of
Yeah.
so much wisdom. I mean, I can't thank you enough for sharing so much wisdom with us. Do you feel like I covered enough? Do you feel like there's anything I didn't cover?
Well, as I said before we started talking, there's no amount of questions that I don't enjoy answering. So we could very easily talk for another couple of hours. We might have to make it a series and consider doing something like that.
Yes,
I think for
yes.
now we covered, I think, most of the basics. I hope we did anyway. I think
Yeah.
our listeners and viewers will kind of will tell us if we did a great job. Hopefully we've left them with just kind of some basic fundamentals, ideas for conversation starters, ideas for some of the kind of boundaries and rules that they can implement at home, how to think about doing those first, how they can intervene if their kids do have a negative experience online. Hopefully we've motivated them to learn a bit more about AI, the different types of AI, the different purposes, do a little bit of research in terms of what are kids saying about AI? Why do they like it so much? Why do they bond, as much as they do? I think we can learn a lot from there as well. We have a lot of kids saying that they feel more accepted and more understood by these AI bots. They don't feel judged. They feel very safe in those exchanges. So I think there's a lot for us to learn there. It might be painful to hear the reasons why they, in some cases, maybe prefer to talk to these technologies as opposed to us. But I hope that we can, again, turn that into a learning, that we can look
Yes.
at why kids are really drawn to these technologies, and I think essentially, make ourselves irreplaceable. I don't see how else we can win, right? I think that's what we have to do. We have to look at why this is happening. What is the quality of this interaction that they have, and then really try to be the ones who are going to provide that to our kids. And we don't have to be alone in it. They always say it takes a village. I think it does take a community to serve all the different roles that a child might
So
need.
true.
But let's really look at why these technologies are becoming so good at what they've become good at. And I can assure you, these are all human-like traits. That's the reason why. There's nothing new that they've invented that we haven't already done ourselves as humans. I think, again, we've lost track a little bit. I think we have been sidetracked, not just because of our use of technology. There are a lot of other things happening in the world that are very difficult and that are very just overwhelming, and hard for so many people, in so many different places. So I think we have gotten a little bit sidetracked, understandably, but I'm hoping that's maybe one of the things that this conversation and all the other conversations that are going to be had on this topic is really going to bring to us. It's going to get us to, like you said, pause, stop and think and decide, okay, how do we want to do things differently? How do we want to strengthen the bonds we have with our kids and make sure that they have strong bonds with other humans? It's crazy that we're having to think about it this way, that we're having to think about, okay, I want my child to have strong human relationships, not just tech relationships. But here we are. We have to think about it.
Oh my gosh.
Crazy.
It's so crazy. I mean, I can't thank you enough for spending so much time with us, for sharing so much
Absolutely.
wisdom with us. I just so appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much again for having me and for just being so open and honest with your questions and just sharing so much of your own self and of your own thinking and mistakes you've made and challenges you have. I think that's the most important thing to do when we talk to parents about parenting topics, is just be really just very honest about the challenges that we all face, and kind of leave the ego outside of the conversation. And so
Thank
I
you.
thoroughly enjoyed this conversation.
Oh, thank you so much. This is Rebecca Greene, and I want to remind
Absolutely.
everyone to spend every day laughing, learning, and loving. Thank you for tuning in to the Whinypaluza podcast. If you like what you heard, please be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. While you are there, leave a review. I love to hear your feedback. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time.
This show has been produced by Market Domination, LLC. To discover how you can have your own show completely done for you and turn it into a real published book and become the authority in your marketplace, go to www.marketdominationllc.com/podcast offer.